Hi, I'm Peter Cavanagh and welcome back to our teaching series, Why on Earth Did Jesus Pray? Well, we're going to go a little deeper today, maybe a bit more serious than ever before, certainly more sensitive, because as you would imagine in the early part of Luke, as we've been studying this theme of Jesus and prayer, the main areas of concentration have been Jesus' ministry, mainly. But here, as we get towards the end of Luke, as you would expect, we're now dealing with issues of betrayal, of the crucifixion, the death of Jesus. And while these events are, of course, unique in many ways to the person of the Lord Jesus, yet I'm sure we can find much that can be edifying and instructive to us today. So let's read a little bit of this from Luke chapter 22 and reading about the Garden of Gethsemane and the temptations that were there. Luke 22 and verse 39. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Verse 43, an angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he arose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation." I don't know whether you noticed, but on two occasions, this instruction to pray that they not fall into temptation is said by Jesus. I tried to emphasize it in the reading. He wants his disciples to pray that they don't fall into temptation. First of all, just on a general point about the life of the Christian disciple today, me and you, I wonder how many times we actually pray a prayer like that. "Lord, lead me not into temptation." We might pray when we feel tempted, but here the prayer is to build a barrier between us, not just us and the sin that we might commit if we were tempted, but that we be kept even from temptation. And of course, it's part of the Lord's Prayer, or the disciples' prayer, that we looked at right at the beginning of our course. We should pray that we be not led into temptation. And I won't ask when was the last time you prayed that, but when will be the next time you do? And maybe for you and me, that ought to be quite soon. There's a period of temptation that has come upon Jesus and the disciples here in the Garden of Gethsemane. It seems logical to me that if Jesus is asking his disciples to pray that they not be tempted, or that they would not fall into temptation, then it must also be true for him. He is facing his greatest temptation, We think of the temptations of Jesus, particularly the 3 temptations given to us in Matthew and Luke as Jesus is in the wilderness. But perhaps here in the garden, the strongest temptations of all have come. And just as Adam found himself tempted in a garden, so Jesus, the new man, the new Adam, is here facing similar temptations. If Jesus is tempted, then we will be. And what is Jesus being tempted with? Well, I think we know. He says, if it be possible, Father, let this cup pass from me. Yet, not my will be done, but yours. So the temptation that Jesus is facing is to not finish the task that the Father had given him to finish, because this was the most difficult part of it. God calls us all to serve him. And clearly there's a lesson here that when we serve God, sometimes we must serve him to our deepest cost. And here is the temptation, that the will of God would not be done. Not by God, but by God's servant. You know, God's will is not always done. When you became a Christian, you didn't become a fatalist. You didn't believe in fate. Some people believe that what will be, and if it's meant to happen, it will happen. And then similar people become Christians, and they just simply bring that with them into their Christian faith. Can I encourage you to have a think about that, if that is you? Because actually, God's will is clearly not always done, because it relies so heavily on many occasions upon human decisions. When we are tempted, the temptation is to think that God's way is not the best way, or that even if we think it might be, we don't want to pay the price that is involved in that. Again, going back to the disciples' prayer, one of the lines in it, let your will be done on earth as it is done in heaven. Sometimes people think that in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed that God's will would be done. Now that's true, but that's not all that was prayed in the garden. Jesus prayed, not my will, but yours be done. And I think one of the challenges is that when we say, Lord, I just want what you want. Please will you have your way in my life. Please have your will in my life. Let your plan unfold. Well, the reality of that is that must begin by us saying, not my plan then, not my way then, not my will or desire then, but yours be done. And so this incredible temptation occurs, and Jesus faces it, but he also wants the disciples to face it in prayer with him. I think we get a little bit of a clue about this just a few verses back in verse 31. Luke 22 and verse 31, Jesus speaks to Simon Peter. And this is what he says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. Well, this is an incredible piece of the New Testament. Satan has asked to sift you as wheat. Now, just to give you an insight into the Greek text, and you may have this as a footnote in your English Bible, there are two words here being used of the word you. One is plural, the other singular. So let me amplify this. Satan has asked to sift all of you disciples as wheat. But Jesus says, I have prayed for you, Simon, you specifically, singular, that your faith may not fail. This is what Satan comes to steal. Sometimes people think that the devil comes to take our health or our wealth or our joy. And while that may occur, but primarily what Satan comes to try to steal is our faith. And he does this maybe by attacking our health and our wealth and our joy and our circumstances. He brings the pressure to bear on our lives, as is happening here just a few verses on in the Garden of Gethsemane. But what I find beautiful about this is that Jesus, in those circumstances, prays for us. I don't know how often a real, genuine, authentic, satanic attack occurs. I know many of us have problems. I'm not sure that the devil is behind too many of them. But when there's a real satanic attack, we learn two things. Number one, that he, the devil, has to ask God before he can do it. There's echoes, of course, of the book of Job here. And when God the Father grants Satan permission to come and try us and test us, Jesus, the great intercessor, prays for us that our faith may not fail. In all of your journeys and challenges, when the pressure comes, you may not be able to be wealthy and healthy and joyful all the time. But Jesus is praying for us that we hold on to our faith. Faith doesn't mean that everything's going to be all right. Faith means that whatever happens, I'm going to be all right, even if everything around me is not all right. And I have a great high priest in heaven who prays for me that my faith may not fail, and so that I might then go and strengthen my brothers. Lead us not into temptation, Lord,